recording prescription drug take-back events. So I moved this to kind of consider all take-back events. It was just, prescription drug take-back days, and we will cover that today, but I also wanted to make sure we just kind of included any other events, because as you guys know, some of you might have a whole entire event day, some of you might only have, a presentation that you guys do for this, but we wanted to make sure we gave a good, well-rounded example of a couple different things. First things first, I also want to start out with just kind of prefacing that every coalition is different. So today's examples are going to be kind of very bare roots of what your coalition could have, but I want to make sure that everyone here knows that just because I am working on it one way today doesn't mean it's going to be a one-size-fit-all for every coalition. They're going to be the same principles, that's why we're going to be going over it today, but your coalition might do something a little bit different than what my example is, and that's fine. Feel free to ask me questions if you're concerned about, your coalition's specific events. At the end today, we will have some time to maybe ask one or two of you from the audience to give an example of how your coalition has your take-back events, and we can actually practice recording those as well if that's something you guys are all interested in. So with that, like I said, thank you guys for being here. This is kind of what we're going to be going through today. We're basically going to be looking at a couple different things. The first one being a prescription drug take-back day. So this is going to be a hosted day that the coalition maybe hosts, provides, that type of stuff. And then our next example is going to be a prescription drug take-back presentation. So maybe your coalition doesn't do a specific day or an event. Maybe you're just part of an event to give a presentation. And then after that, we're going to get into just kind of the general thing that a lot of coalitions do, sometimes on a daily basis, and that's distributing prescription drug disposal boxes, lock boxes, disposal pouches, different things like that. So we're going to kind of hit prescription drugs, I guess you would say, kind of all around in terms of what a lot of coalitions do. So we'll hopefully get you guys some good examples today and get into REACH a little bit and show you guys how you go about entering those. Does anyone have any questions they want to start out with or anything that they are really wanting to get out of today? I want to ask you guys to make sure I'm not just sitting up here talking about a whole bunch of stuff you guys already know. So as we get into this first example, feel free to pop into the chat something that you maybe want to get better at or learn about today that you want me to focus on. Okay, so our first example I want to go through today is probably going to be one of our most encompassing that we're going to look at today. And as you guys can see, it is quite long. So I went ahead and just wrote up a sample description of what my coalition did for this event. These are good examples of descriptions for your events. If this is something that you're struggling with, is like the description writing process, look at how I've kind of wrote mine up and use that as a guide to help you pull out the information you need for yours to make sure your description is good and encompasses everything it needs to. So first things first, we have a take-back day. So my coalition held a 3-hour prescription drug take-back day event at Walgreens Pharmacy. We had a total of 100 community members stop by, and the coalition ended up collecting a total of 80 pounds of prescription drugs. Great. To get into our entry a little bit more, I went into the fact that we had 4 coalition members that volunteered for this event. And the event they each volunteered for was 4 hours. We had 2 police officers who also were there to provide security for our event. And the event lasted a total of 3 hours, so we got 3 hours of their time. So the 4 hours for the coalition members is because I factored in some setup time that we had for them. We obviously got there a little bit early to set up, so that's why that's at 4 hours, and my police officers are only at 3. The coalition provided handouts about properly disposing of unwanted medications. We ended up distributing about 100 of those. And then we gave out goodie bags, for the people who had kids and stuff, with coalition, fun swag items, just a little fun something to give the community members. So this, like I said, is very encompassing in terms of what happened. Before we get into REACH and really breaking it down in terms of recording it in the actual REACH software system, I want to walk through the description with you guys. And that's because I want to be able to have you guys visualize what entries you're going to have before you even start doing it, because it can be very helpful to do that sometimes. so you don't miss any. So I kind of started to bold out in my description important things that I wanted to make sure I was capturing, and that way it referenced back down to my output type I was selecting. So first things first, we obviously have a service provided here. My coalition hosted this event, we had the Take Back Day, so we can count that as a service provided. Hopefully everyone's on the same page about that. Anytime your coalition is hosting, co-hosting, even if you're just tabling at a event, and we'll get into that here later on, this is where you'll always have a service provided. The next thing we have here, so I hope you guys noticed, is we had that media piece, right? So we had 2 different media pieces though. This is where it can get a little bit confusing in terms of making sure we record correctly in Reach, because a lot of times coalitions maybe miss one of their media entries, or maybe they try to combine them together. For today's purposes, I'm going to actually keep them separate, because one of my media things I did, which was the 100 flyers about disposing unwanted medications, that was directed at prescription drugs itself. Whereas my coalition goodie bags, these are also a media item, but I'm not necessarily targeting a specific goal with those goodie bags. They're just kind of, a fun little handout that we had. So that's why I'm going to keep those 2 separate. Next, we have resources generated. And for those of you who have never tracked a professional service before, this entry does include a professional service. So I will actually have 2 separate resources generated for this entry, or for this event as well. The first one being my volunteers, which is pretty obvious. We had our 4 coalition volunteers for 4 hours each. That second one is that professional service for the 2 police officers who provided security for us. We didn't pay them to be there. However, they were on the clock, they were in full uniform, they were getting paid, but the coalition did not have to shell out that money to get them to provide security. And then lastly, you'll notice that this one is in green, and that's because this can be dependent on your coalition. The reason it's in green is because, hopefully you guys know this, if not, you're learning something new today. The only time it's going to be a community change is if this is the first time your coalition is hosting a Take Back event. The caveat to that is community changes are location specific. So my coalition has held community prescription drug takebacks in the past. However, the way to make this one a community change is to say that this is our first time we're hosting it at Walgreens in one of our other communities. So we have a county-wide coalition. This is the first time we're hosting one at the Walgreens pharmacy in Riverside. So that would be something you'd have to add to your description, is that little bit more piece of information to be able to check off that community change box as well. So hopefully you guys kind of get the hang there of that. However, if this is just, your coalition's, annual event, this is our annual prescription drug take back day, same place, same community we're serving, it's not going to be a community change because you've already hosted it once. So hopefully that helps you guys all feel comfortable there. Let's go ahead and we're actually going to practice entering this in Reach. Whoop. Let me find my Reach window here. And let's go ahead and just log in and go down to our practice site. And let me change the view so some of you might not get confused on different things here. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and enter this now. So we've kind of been talking through it. We went through our outputs. We know what we need to have. Let's go ahead and enter this, shall we? So let me copy in my description so everyone can see the same thing. Does this also refer to all events if hosted in different locations? So if you host more than one, but in different locations, each is a community. Yeah, so Colleen, if it's the first time happening in that location, yes to the community change. If it is not, it'll just simply be your normal service provided resources and everything else that you have. The key thing is always, obviously with your community changes, is this the first time it's happening? So if it's a first time in a different location, then yes. All righty. That's a great question, great clarification there, Colleen. So we're gonna go ahead and just put this in as if we did it in the end of March. We're just going to give ourselves a date there. We're just going to select a demo from the top of the list. And then we're going to get to our output types here. So remember, guys, we talked about the 3 first, and then we also might have a community change. For sake of this, I want to be able to show you guys a community change. So we're actually going to add that extra information in here to take it to that next level. So we have Coalition hosted a 3-hour prescription drug take-back day at Walgreens Pharmacy in Riverside for the first time. So if you guys are having trouble with community actions, community changes, hopefully you know that adding the word first time or new, significantly modified lets us know that this is something new that's happening that you guys have worked on or have completed in a sense. That way we know, okay, this is definitely a community change. This is the first time they're doing it in Riverside at the Walgreens there. So we have our community change box checked, so that one's good. Next, we had our service provided. So we're going to check that one next, just kind of go down the list. In terms of a prescription drug take-back day, when it comes to type of service, remember that capacity is when we're building capacity of those in attendance at this service to turn around and do prevention work themselves. Or in kind of layman's terms, simpler, we're basically training someone who's going to turn around and train someone else, right? For a prescription drug take-back event, that's not the basis behind the event. We're really just there to, collect medication, maybe give out some educational material. Depending on your event for your coalition, you might have a capacity piece, but most, if not all the time, your prescription drug take-back days use that preventative service type. Numbers served, we had our 100 community members. We're going to go ahead and type in 100 here. And length of service is where it can vary depending on your event. So this is another kind of gray area that it can be dependent on your coalition. Some coalitions I know in terms of our clients have this prescription drug take-back day event, and it's intended to be kind of an all-day event. They'll have fun activities for the youth to do, parents hang out, and people just kind of congregate and hang out there all day for the event, right? That is where we get into the length of service. So if it's more of a all-day event, people are hanging out, doing different things, you have different tables set up, fun events for the kids, you can claim the full 3 hours. However, most take-back events consist of, the coalition having a booth or a table kind of set up, maybe an additional informational table section. But most of the time, it's set up kind of like a tabling event where you collect drugs as people, drive by and drop them off and they leave, right? If that's the type of event that you host, your length of service is going to be smaller, just like it would be if you were tabling at anyone else's event. So if on average, you're only talking to the people who come to distribute their medication to you, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to want to make sure your length of service is 5 to 10 minutes. So anywhere in the middle, 0.1 is probably a good average. Obviously, if you have longer conversations, you could do anything larger than that. Like I said, if it's an all-day event, make sure to collect that full 3 hours. However, if it's just kind of tabling and you're only really interacting with people for a couple minutes and they're leaving, make sure to reflect that here as well. So we're just going to go with mine as a tabling event because that's what we did. We just kind of had a drive up. People could drive up, almost like a drive-through window and give us their unwanted medication that we would dispose of. So we're going to go with a shorter, about 5-10 minutes for us. Does anyone have any questions on this part so far? Am I losing anyone? Is anyone confused? Feel free to pop it in the chat. Let me know. I'm going to keep going on. I'll keep an eye on the chat, though, if anyone does. The next part we need to get into is our resources generated. So we did have some resources that we need to record. However, if you guys know, if we're recording our stuff into Reach, we can only do one resource at a time. So I'm going to start out with recording my volunteer time because that was the first one I listed here. So we had 4 hours times 4 volunteers. So my volunteer hours will be 16. And then my volunteer value will be your national average of 25.43. Unless your state is higher, please do use your state rate. I know some of you are in New York, your state rate's higher. Please make sure to use the correct rate for your coalition. And then we have to get into what will these volunteer hours be used for. And these are going to be for personnel for their volunteer time. So now we have our one resources generated there, so we're good. To record our other resources generated, we are going to have to obviously add this entry and then just add a copy, so we'll get into that here in a second. Does anyone else have any questions so far? Just want to make sure I'm pausing to give anyone time to, ask their questions. We also need to get into our media though for this. So you guys will notice we will have 4 output types that we're using just for our one prescription drug take back day. So for our media, we do have 2 different medias we need to record. So same thing like the resources, we'll have to do one at a time. So let's record our prescription drug handouts first. So we're going to put those as a newsletter flyer since they're just simply kind of a handout flyer. And our impressions for those, we distributed 100. So now that we have all of our different output types, the information associated with those output types, and we double checked that all that information's up here, so we should be good, we're going to come down and finish out our entry. So we have to align this with our problem goal first, which, as we know, this is a prescription drug take back day event. So we have prescription drug abuse. We're going to put this under access. And then our local condition is prescription drugs are not disposed of properly. If you do not know, all of your prescription drug take back events utilize the strategy of enhancing access and reducing barriers. Anytime you distribute a prescription drug black box, it will use that same strategy as well. So if you're kind of, never sure which one to use, you're like, well, maybe it's just providing information. Anytime you're providing a prescription drug take back event, distributing a prescription drug black box, disposal box, it's going to use this strategy because you're actively, enhancing access to disposal while at the same time, reducing access to youth who are trying to access medication. So that's where the kind of the double-sided happens there. My sectors involved for my coalition's Take Back Day included our substance abuse agency, our coalition. We also included the law enforcement in our plans because, we wanted them there as security and just wanted to make sure we were following, proper protocols and, the law. And then we also had some just civic volunteers help us out. So our sectors targeted here, I'm going to highlight a few that we were really trying to target with this, and that's going to be your parents. We were also really trying to target businesses, so like other businesses, as well as the health industry and doctors or other places like that that might need to get rid of some unwanted medication. And then my last one, I'm just going to throw in general, because it really was just kind of a general community event that really anyone could come to. The last thing we have here is my who to report to. So we're going to go ahead and put this under federal grant, which is my DFC. And then who helped, I'm just going to say coalition members, because I do not have the list with me right now. And then we can go ahead and add our entry. All right, so Calandra had a question. She said the total amount of times says 10 hours, but in the description it says 3 hours. Did I type in the wrong number somewhere? Oh, so the total length is calculating up your total amount of time. So the reason that looks a little bit wonky is because technically if you're serving 100 people, about 10 minutes each, that's going to be your total length. This doesn't have to add up to your full 3-hour event. It really just depends on these numbers here. We want to make sure these are right because this is going to be quite larger, mainly because you could have 4 volunteers each talking to, one person at the same time. So you're technically providing multiple time of service there. That's why sometimes this number is a bit higher. I hope that kind of helps answer your question, Calandra. If you have anything else that you kind of are confused about, feel free to let me know. Colleen said if you talked with someone or with some individuals more than 0.1 for services provided, your total can be the actual length of the event, correct? Yes, so I always get kicked back entries when the length of service is over the actual event. Yeah, honestly, I really just look at this number in terms of your length of service here. So as long as up in the description you said, Coalition hosted prescription drug take back event, prescription drug take back event at Walgreens, a total of 100 community members stopped by. You could say, and spent time interacting during the whole 3-hour event. The other thing I would recommend, Colleen, and even Calandra too, if this is something that your coalition runs into or has the issue with, add in a little bit of information here, such as also had 5 other tables set up for people to talk to, and just kind of spend time there. Make it known that there was other things for them to do, and that's why they spent so much time there. Because then we're okay with having this length of service a little bit larger. We might kick it back from time to time, Colleen, if we aren't quite sure that it makes sense in terms of what actually happened at the event. But I think I score you, Colleen, so it's probably just kind of a communication error that we're having. And like I said, feel free just to add that little bit more piece of information to your description, and it should get rid of that issue right up. Okay, perfect. Let me know if you guys do have any other questions or concerns. We can always chat offline too. All right, so we have this entry fully completed, but we do have to add it. And then we do need to add a couple more pieces of information that we're missing. So I'm going to go ahead and pop in our filter here so we can find it. Okay, so we have our first 4 entries that we did, but as we know, we have to add another media. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one because we have to report our goodie bags that we distributed. So we had 70 goodie bags. I'm going to put this one under other media type just because to me, I want to make sure that I'm not catching that under newsletters or flyers or any other media that I'm trying to track. We have to change the number of impressions to 70. And for my goodie bags, since they weren't directly involving only prescription drug abuse content, I'm actually going to change my problem goal to general ATOD for this one. Just because I want to be really, targeting in my outputs, and I want to make sure everything is reflected correctly. We're also just going to change the strategy for this one to providing information, because the goal of the goodie bags wasn't to increase access to anything, really just to kind of give them this information, right, about the coalition and our upcoming events. So after that, we're going to go ahead and add this one. So now we'll see that we have our 2 media here. So we have one for the goodie bags and one for our flyers. The next thing we need to do is also duplicate our resources generated so we can record that time for our police officers, right? So we had 2 police officers provided security for a 3-hour event. So they gave a total of 6 hours times $50 will be $300. So that's where we're going to get our in-kind. We want to make sure we give them, their proper due and record them for personnel as well. Depending on your coalition, you guys might use them for something else like communication. That's completely okay. Just because this is for their active time to provide that security, I like to go with personnel because it makes the most sense. All right, oops, we got to select our recorder again up top. And then we have to scroll down to the bottom and add this one. Okay, so like I said, guys, this was probably one of the most encompassing services that we have, or I guess prescription drug take-back days that we see, because there's just so many moving parts to the event that we want to make sure we record them correctly. Like I said, if there is specific things about your event that makes it a little bit different than this one, that's completely okay. Always feel free to shoot us an email if you want to make sure that you are recording them correctly and keep coming up with the same, reasoning for getting marked as needs attention, like Colleen was saying. feel free to shoot us an email, because it might just be the littlest, piece of information that's missing, or the little, miscommunication between, your score and what you guys are trying to convey in your output. So this is our first example. I have two more that are a little bit shorter for you guys today. We're going to pop back over to the PowerPoint. First off, though, does anyone have any questions about recording this type of event or why I did it the way I did? I will give you guys a quick second to do that. While you guys are popping any questions in, my other kind of more of an advanced tip for you guys is once you get all of your entries recorded for a prescription drug take back day, feel free to go in and edit some of these for the specifics. So you could come in here and go to, let's see, this is for the in-kind for the police officers. So we could actually take out this whole bit about the handouts. You could probably leave in the rest and then update this one. So this is just going to help clear things up for the evaluator and the scorer as well to see exactly what was happening here, especially because you might have different things happening within one entry like this one does. So just kind of clearing out some things that are not important for this specific entry. So like this one is for media. We don't need to know about resources generated in a media entry. So sometimes, clearing out some of that waste that you don't need can help clear things up too. Awesome, so I'm not seeing any other questions come in. We're gonna go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint and go on to our next entry. So our next one is just a simple prescription drug take-back presentation. So my coalition ended up doing a different little twist 2 years ago where they just had the local police department actually held the prescription drug take-back day event. And we were just brought in for a quick, brief 30-minute presentation at the beginning of the day event. So theirs was kind of designed kind of like a fairy type event. There was multiple things for families to come and do, participate in. And we were there to give the brief 30-minute presentation at the beginning of the event. Again, we just want to keep it simple. We had 100 community members end up attending the event. And our coalition also had 2 coalition members volunteer for 1 hour each to, get their prep for the presentation and actually give the presentation. So this is a very simple one. We want to make sure we had a couple different ideas for you guys. For this one, we're going to, again, kind of highlight some of those important parts in our entry here. So we have the coalition provided a brief 30-minute presentation. This is kind of one of those tricky word problems, like they give, story problems to kids in, 5th grade math or whatever, where it's like you don't need all the information in the description, but you do need some. Our 4 hours here is not needed. We don't care that their event lasted 4 hours. We just want to know how long the coalition provided service for. So that's why we only need the 30 minutes here. We also had 100 community members present, so that lets us know how many people we provided service to. And then we also know that we had 2 coalition members volunteer their time to do this presentation. The other thing we're noticing is we do see this little community change again. Again, this is very dependent on your coalition's work in your event specifically. If this is the first time that you are partnering with the local police department for this event to host this presentation, that can be considered a community change. However, if you guys are very good partners already with the police department and this is not a huge deal and you're like, oh yeah, just another partnership with them coming to give another presentation, for their event that they host, it's probably not going to be a community change. We really only want to see that if it's a new partnership development and it's a new, obviously, community change that you guys are doing. Again, this can be very dependent and kind of gray area for your coalition, so feel free to let us know if you're ever, unsure and want to make sure that you're recording it if need be. So when we do these in Reach, I'm not going to go too much into this one just because of time purposes for today, guys. But this one we do only really have 2 entries. So we're not going to consider this a new partnership today because my coalition works with the police department quite often, giving community presentations at a lot of their events. So this isn't our first time doing this for them. So we're not going to consider it a community change for my coalition today. However, we do still have to record our volunteer time and our presentation time. So when we're in Reach, this one's going to be pretty simple. We're going to paste in our description for this one, and we're just going to keep it on the same date, so it's right here in our filtered view, select our recorder as demo. And then we know that all we have today was a resources for our volunteer and a services for our presentation. Again, our presentation for this coalition event that we had is going to be preventative. We did not go give this presentation at the police department's take back day intending to train those people there to turn around and train someone else. We were just kind of giving them general medication safety tips, proper disposal procedures, just kind of general information. So we're going to go with preventative for this one. The number served, we had our 100 community members there, so we have our number served as 100. Our length of service is for our presentation time. So if we were there giving a 30-minute presentation, we know our length of service should be 0.5. And then it calculates out our total length of service provided for us. Okay, Phyllis had a question really quick, so I'm going to pause. Regarding community change, if we hold an event for the first time, that's a community change. If we are partnering with another group for the first time doing this event, is that considered another community change? Yes. Just make sure when you're doing it, Phyllis, that you are emphasizing that it's not because it's the first time you're hosting the event, because you've already probably hosted it before. Make it clear that this is our first time we're partnering, with the law enforcement to host this event. That way we can see that this is an established new partnership and make the link that that's the community change. That'd be my only kind of tip on that, because while yes, the first time you host the event would be a community change, if you're hosting it the following year with a new partner to maybe provide more information and just more substance to the event, that would be a community change then again. It's actually the first time we had event and the first time we partnered. So yeah, you could technically have two changes there. One for the first time for the event and one for a first time partnership. Yep, just like I said, just make sure that you have the wording in the description really specific about which one is which. So great. All right, so the next thing we have for this event is our resource type. So we had volunteers, so this one's pretty easy. We had, what did we have? 2 volunteers, right? Or no, 4 coalition members. Volunteer for 4 hours each. Oh, that's because I'm looking at the wrong example. Might help if I copy and paste the right example, right guys? There we go. Okay, so we have the coalition, 2 coalition members for 1 hour each. Sorry for the confusion, if anyone got a little confused there. We have 2 total volunteer hours then that we want to track, times our volunteer value, our standard value, to get our volunteer hours as well. This is again going to be for personnel, and then we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with our entry. We have a prescription drug abuse, access, and then prescription drugs are not disposed properly. Again, we're using our standard enhancing access, reducing barriers. Even though we were just there to give a presentation, this is where you kind of get tripped up. I would actually more so recommend, if you're just giving a presentation, to use providing information here. Let's say that while you're at this presentation, you guys were also distributing disposal pouches to everyone in the audience to go along with your presentation. Then you could go into more of the enhancing access and reducing barriers strategy. However, if you guys are just really there to give an informative presentation, your strategy should be more aligned with the providing information approach. If anyone has any questions or concerns about that, let me know. But a lot of times this is where we need to really think back to what is our intention behind this output. And at this simple presentation, we're just intending to give people information. So if you did both, can you make 2 entries? Yes, you can. So that is where you would get into having 2 different entries, and your take back events start to really grow from there, Colleen. But yes, you could have one for your presentation and then have, copy and paste and do another one for the actual distribution of your lock boxes and that time, so you can use that correct strategy. So for my sectors involved for this one, we're going to just go with law enforcement as well as general. And then for my sectors targeted, we went with general because was really just a community event that we invited everyone to. Who to report to, federal grants, and then like I said, I don't have my name sheet next to me, so I'm just going to type in demo here, but I do really recommend getting into some of those really big key stakeholders who helped you with this output or this, event. So we're going to add this one, and now we have our second example. All right, so we do have one more example to go through, and I know we're kind of getting into it today, so I don't want to go too much further in depth because I don't want to get anyone too confused. But the next example that I want to go into is going to be just distributing prescription drug disposal in lock boxes or pouches. So this is kind of where Colleen was going. She said, if I am putting in key stakeholders' participation in the description, do I need to add them to the bottom who helped section? Yes, I would actually, Colleen, I would say just put them down in the who helped section, maybe to trim up your description a little bit so it's not as, so your descriptions aren't as long and that way you're not, putting it in two places and wasting your time. I would almost recommend just maybe moving it down to the who helped section. That way it'll be an easy filter for you too in the future if you're trying to see, what stakeholders have helped with what. It might help to be a little bit more inclusive of who they were, but honestly, it's completely up to you. So if you want to keep it where it is, I'm not going to be a huge stickler on, where you put it. So it's really kind of, I guess it's really up to you. So I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're going to continue on. So this one was kind of, like I said, going into where Colleen's head was at with, what if I'm distributing and having a presentation? Well, this one is specifically about the local community having a fair day. And the coalition was really just there to distribute information and prescription drug lock boxes to community members who stopped by to get them. We had some that we wanted to distribute, so we took that with our information. There was a total of 4,000 community members that attended this, one-day fair event. We ended up distributing 250 prescription drug lock boxes for the home. This also included 2 flyers with each box. So we gave out 2 informational, how to, properly lock up prescription drug flyers with each box that we distributed. So that's 500 flyers. And then we also distributed an additional flyer about upcoming coalition events and activities because we wanted to make sure to give out some general information about our coalition as well. We ended up having 6 volunteers that manned the table for 2 hours each throughout the event. So like I said, the event might have been, it was a day-long event. We only had 6 volunteers for 2 hours each. So we kind of rotated them out. In terms of recording this entry, there's a lot going on. Again, this is kind of a busier event, multiple different pieces, but a little bit different pieces. So when we're looking at this one, we wanted to highlight our main points. So this is going to get into the 4,000 community members that attended. So that's going to be our service. The number of distributed boxes, as well as our prescription drug flyers, as well as our coalition-specific flyers. So we have a lot of media happening. And then we also want to make sure that we're recording our resources for volunteer time as well. So there's kind of a couple different things. Notice I did not put community change for this one. Most of the time, if it is a local fair event, it's not typically going to be recorded as a community change. Again, if this is going down the realm of a new partnership and you partnered with the fair committee to maybe host this event or develop that relationship, you could claim a community change, but I'm going to say it's going to be very rare that that will happen. Most of the time it's going to be your 3 that you see here: your services provided, your media, and your resources generated. When we get into reach, we're going to go ahead and do this one now. Make sure I have the right description before I copy and paste the wrong one again. Alrighty. Let's add a new entry. Again, we're going to use the same date for this one, so it's on the same page. Order. And then we're going to get into our different output types. So like we said, we had our first one, which was services provided. So let's do that one first. Our service, again, typically for tabling events, your type of service is going to be preventative. I hope you guys are kind of noticing that pattern as we go through today too. Most of your prescription drug take-back days, events, presentations will generally be preventative. The only time they could get into that capacity is if, let's say, you guys are doing a prescription drug training to train maybe a couple people who are there who can then turn around and train other employees or other people in the community. That's where that capacity piece would get into. The other thing you could have as capacity would be kind of like a recruitment activity of sorts. So maybe you guys have a coalition, opioid or prescription drug committee who works on all that work. If that committee is out actively recruiting or has an event to recruit new, task force or committee members, that could be capacity here. But like I said, it's very seldom going to use that type of service here. Most of the time, you're going to use just that general preventative because you're there to give out this information, these lock boxes, and just have the people use them. Our numbers served for a tabling event. So this is another area that can get a little bit confusing for people. I am going to suggest that you use the number of people who attended. So even if you, so let's say that you didn't keep track of how many people came to your table and you're just like, oh my gosh, Jessica, like I can't remember. I just know we had a total of 4,000 people at this event. It is okay to use that 4,000. We're not going to penalize you if you say 4,000 people attended. That's completely okay. If you're someone though who is like, well, I know that exactly 2,000 people came up to my table, then put 2,000 here. That's completely up to you. Just make sure that you then put that information in the description, such as, 4,000 community members attended the event, but the coalition interacted with 2,000 of them. Simple little add-on there, not much information you have to add, but just that little bit lets us know where you got this number from. Because if you don't, we might mark it as needs attention and say, your number served should be larger. You said 4,000. So just always make sure that you're connecting what you're putting down here to your description. So let's change this back to 4,000. Our length of service, as we know for tabling events, like we talked about a little bit earlier, tend to be very, short, brief interactions. Go with your average. So if you know you had a lot of short ones, some long ones, like I said, you can go with 0.1, 0.15, whatever you feel was your average time, go with that. All right, so that is our service provided portion. The next thing we're going to get into is our resources generated. So for this event, all we had was some volunteer time again. We had 6 volunteers for 2 hours each. So that's 12 volunteer hours. So we're going to go ahead and put 12 in here. And then our value, our standard value again. And then what will it be used for? Personnel. The other thing I wanted to mention that we didn't really get into too much today because I didn't want to make the examples, too crazy. But if your coalition also tracks, mileage or transportation time for its volunteers, make sure you're recording that as well, because you could have, honestly, my coalition had about 4 different resources for this actual event because we had our volunteers. We actually tracked them for their transportation time to get there. We had a discount on our table booth that we got. And then we also tracked the mileage for our employees that don't get reimbursed for their mileage. So we did actually have 4 resources for this event. I only, for purposes of time today, kept in the 1, which is our volunteer hours. But make sure if your coalition is lacking in that department of tracking resources generated and getting kind of your match, really think through what did our coalition not have to pay for this event, because that'll help you be like, oh yeah, we had a discount on our table space, or oh yeah, we didn't charge them for transportation. They volunteered their time to drive a half hour here and a half hour home. So making sure to track those as well is really important. So we have our service provided now. We have our resources generated. Our media is where it goes a little bit more crazy, right? We have 3 different medias, I guess you'd say, that we need to record. So let's go back up to the top and start with our prescription drug lock boxes. So we distributed 250 of those. So we want to come down to our media type. I would consider these other because they are not going to fall under one of my other 6 categories. So we're going to go with 250 here. And then we're going to continue on with our entry and come back to our other two later. So let's go ahead and add these. Prescription drug abuse, access, prescription drugs are not disposed properly. For this one, I am going to use enhancing access and reducing barriers because my media for this one, this is why I'm recording the prescription drug boxes first, because the prescription drug boxes do use that strategy. But you'll notice when we get into our flyers, those will be more just a providing information strategy. So that's why I did it the way I did and did those boxes first. But all of these will use this strategy. Sectors involved, we're just going to go with general to make it easy on ourselves for this last entry. General and general. Who to report to, we're going to do federal grant again. And then who helped, like I said, include, I would probably include down here, the names of those volunteers, those 6 volunteers that helped out. Maybe, yourself or other staff members that were involved as well. And we're going to add this one. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to copy that media entry. So remember, we have to add our other 2 medias that we had. The first one being the 2 additional flyers that we gave with each of our boxes. Those flyers added up to 500. So we want to go with 500 here. Like I said, we're going to change our strategy down here though. Since they were just kind of general informative flyers giving that information, we're going to change that strategy to providing information. We got to select recorder up here. And then we're going to add this one. All right, so just want to make sure we have our 2 medias out here. And now we need to do another media for just our general coalition flyers that we handed out. So of those, we handed out 1,500. So let's get that number in there. And this is where we need to, again, make a couple additional changes. The first one being our problem goal. Since it was our general coalition flyer, we want to go general here. It's going to go with lack of awareness, lack of communication. And then we want to change our strategy again to providing information because that is going to be our media flyer's intended purpose. And then we're going to add this one. And then we have our 5 entries for this event. With that, guys, I hope you guys got some great information today. Always feel free to reach out. We are here. We can, email. We can always do Zoom one-on-ones. Let me know what you guys need, and I'm more than willing to help. So thank you guys for joining today, and have a great rest of your day. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy out there, and feel free to let us know if you need anything.